Hello. Good morning, everybody. I'll have a quick camera check in a very short while when I appear on screen. So it looks like the Corona days are coming to an end. I think this may be, there you go, maybe push it up slightly. This is going to be the last Wednesday that we have together. So we're going to do independent writing. I shouldn't imagine there's many people who are going to attend today. So it's going to be a lot of me speaking, I'm afraid. But I've got lots to talk about anyway. So today we're going to be looking at independent writing for the TOEFL exam. And as many of you already know, it's the very last question on the exam. You'll be given 30 minutes to write an essay, which should average around 300 words, regarding a question. Generally, you know, the question type on the exam is, do you agree or disagree? But we do have other types too. Today we'll be focusing mainly on do you agree or disagree questions, and we'll be looking at how we can write supporting paragraphs and the introduction. We'll leave the conclusion maybe for the next Corona outbreak. So let's get on with the lesson. Let's see what we have. If we have enough time today, we may have the opportunity to do some adjective clauses too. I'm not sure how long this is going to last. So let's go to the current slide. We'll start from the beginning. Okay, so if you're out there, if you're watching, I see there's 6 people online at the moment. Say hi. Always like it when students participate. There's not going to be much chance or opportunity for you to participate today, though. As I said, you know, I wasn't really expecting a large turnout. So it's just going to be basically me talking until the end of the lesson about independent writing. So before we continue with writing strategies and how we can write a really good essay, I'm going to show you some examples of what ETS are looking for and maybe what they're not looking for. So on the screen you have an example of an introduction. This is an original response from ETS. It's not one of my students. So let's quickly read through that. The importance of the issue raised by the posted statement, namely creating a new holiday for people, cannot be underestimated as it concerns the very fabric of society. As it stands, the issue of creating a new holiday raises profound implications for the future. However, although the subject matter in general cannot be dismissed lightheartedly, the perspective of the issue as presented by the statement raises certain qualms regarding practical application. Wow! Let me open up my little laser thingamajig here. I always forget how to point eruptions, of course. There we go. Whoa, there. So we've got some really, really great vocabulary here. Issues raised. You know, to bring an issue about, namely creating a new holiday. Well, we have an idea what the question is. The question is, if you could create a holiday, a national holiday, what type of holiday would you create? And this was one person's response, their introduction for this. We have here another very nice structure, fabric, the very fabric of society, you know, the intricacies of society, as it were. And then we have these profound implications for the future. And if you look here, however, although, hey, Panache, hey, how are you? You'll be doing a lot of watching today, I'm afraid. There'll be more questions on Saturday. But stick around, you know, this is important information. I will ask questions occasionally, but nothing as heavy as we've been looking at over the last few weeks. So back here we have this however, although, and you know, I know for many of you this may be a strange structure, but however, although can be used together. As we looked a couple of weeks ago, I did a class on conjunctions. It's the same in Turkish too. Sometimes we can take 2 conjunctions or connectors and put them side by side for extra emphasis. And however, although is one of these structures. We can also have maybe but, however, and in addition to. So it's not incorrect. It's therefore for emphasis, basically. Hey, Gulsafa, how are you? Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you, Panache. Thank you for asking. Thank you very much. Getting used to life, going back to normal. It's strange. You know, I've been at home for nearly 3 months in isolation, and the streets of Kadikoy were beautiful. They were really quiet. Now, you know, everything's going back to normal. Sanki ortada korona yok. Hadi bakalım. So, you know, when we look at this, you know, it does look fantastic. Actually, grammatically, there's not a single mistake there. And we can, or we may be under the impression that this is the type of essay that ETS are looking for. However, ETS, I think this essay, the complete essay, got no more than 1 point. It got the lowest possible point. Even though the structures look really good, this student has basically just memorized long structures and they've put them together. If anyone's planning on taking the TOEFL exam, I strongly recommend against memorizing these long structures and one after the other and hoping that you're going to do very, very well. Actually, ETS have the opposite opinion. They don't like it. A structure's only good if it's relevant. And here we have an example of a paragraph in which pretty much everything's irrelevant. The only thing I can really understand here is this idea of a new holiday for people. The rest of it, the vocabulary is amazing. However, it really has no meaning. If we have a look at another example, this is an example of a supporting paragraph from a student who wrote an essay for the exam. Again, these are not my students' examples, these are from ETS themselves. So let's read through this one. Hey Evren, how are you? Welcome to the... Evren, sorry, I haven't got my glasses on. Yakından bakayım. Eren. Hey Eren, how are you? Sorry man. So, at the heart of any discussion regarding an issue pertaining to creating a new holiday, it has to be borne in mind that a delicate line has to be trod when dealing with such matters. The human resources involved in, energy sir, phoning for their money, no doubt. The human resources involved in such matters cannot be guaranteed regardless of all the good intentions that may be lavished. While it's true that creating a new holiday might be viable and laudable remedy, it is transparently clear that applied wrongly, such a course of action could be calamitous and compound the problem rather than provide a solution. Again, we've got some really fantastic vocabulary here pertaining to. It's an important word, pertain. It means related to. If you were here for my suffix classes, we spoke about pertaining, being related to, being related to something. It has to be borne in mind. Now they're sending me text messages. You're going to get no money. So it has to be borne in mind that a delicate line has to be trod. Borne in mind means to remember at an important time. That a delicate line has to be trod. Well, you know, if you go to the circus, those people who walk on that very thin line, the tightrope walkers, if I remember correctly the English. I can't remember the Turkish, jumbas, something like that. You know, you can imagine they have to be very, very careful with every step that they take. So here, a delicate line has to be trod. Basically means, it's an idiomatic expression, which means, you know, you have to be careful. You have to be careful in this situation. It's a delicate situation. What else do we have here? Regardless of all, that may be lavished, to throw upon, to give plenty of. While it's true that creating a new holiday viable, workable, and laudable, well, if we look at the word applaud, which means to give someone praise. So a laudable remedy would be a remedy which is praised by many people. And a remedy here is used as a solution. It has other meanings. A remedy would be a type of medication that you take to make yourself feel better. It's not a cure. A cure is different. A remedy just makes you feel slightly better. Maybe, I don't know, ıhlama chai or something. That's a remedy. But here it means solution. And to compound the problem means to make a problem worse. Now it looks good. The vocabulary is amazing. I can imagine everybody at home going, wow, this is amazing. I don't understand anything. He must get very good marks for this. But the truth is, again, this student, I think, got 0 points. We got to remember the question. The question is, if you could create a holiday, what type of holiday would you create? And again, we only have this one word here, new holiday. The rest of this reading passage and the rest of this this writing paragraph is totally unrelated to the question. Even though the vocabulary and the language is immaculate, it's not related to the question in any shape or form. Therefore, this student got really, really low points. I think, if I remember correctly, they got 0 points. But that was just an example of an introduction. Let's look at a whole example. Again, this essay is an original essay from ETS. It's authentic. It's not written by one of my students. It's from the ETS book itself. Should I read through this? Yeah, well, reading's okay. Nothing's wrong with it. I think we've got plenty of time to cover today's subject anyway. So let's begin with the first paragraph, the introduction. And I think, if I remember correctly, the question for this, before we begin, is a teacher's knowledge of the subject is more important than his ability to socialize with students. Yeah, I think something like that. It'll become clearer in very shortly by reading this, actually. So let's start. I remember every teacher that has taught me since I was at kindergarten. If a friend wants to know who our first grade teacher was in elementary school, all they have to do is ask me. The teachers looked all very kind and understanding in my eyes as a child. They had special relationships with nearly each and every one of the students and were very nice to everyone. That's the reason I remember them all. It's not a fantastic introduction. We do have some uncomfortable sort of phrases, as it were. Not really uncomfortable, awkward is the word I'm looking for. This one here in particular, they were all very kind and understanding in my eyes as a child. Really, it's not an expression that we use in English. I've got a feeling that the student has translated an expression from their own language and they've translated that directly into English. There are other minor grammatical mistakes too, but they're not important at the moment. You know, for an introduction, we have an idea, a rough idea what the question is, and we have an idea how the passage is going to be organized. But as I said, not a fantastic introduction. Let's go into the first supporting paragraph. A teacher's primary goal is to teach students the best they can about the things that are in our textbooks, and more important, how to show respect for one another. They teach us how to live a better life by getting along with everyone. In order to do that, the teachers themselves have to be able to relate well with students. Well, if we compare this paragraph with the second supporting paragraph here, we can actually see that it's relatively short. We should always aim to make sure that our paragraphs are balanced with each other. And what I mean by balanced, I mean they should be around the same size. If paragraph 1 has around 100 words, then paragraph 2 should be around 100 words too. And paragraph 3 should also be around 100 words. We were also missing an example. There's no example here in this paragraph, which if he had added an example, he could have lengthened that supporting paragraph quite considerably. So let's go to the second supporting paragraph. As you can see, it's quite long. My parents are teachers too. One teaches biology and one teaches English, but that's not the reason I'm calling them teachers. They are teachers because they teach how to act in special situations and how to cooperate with each other. I have a brother, and my parents use different approaches when teaching us. They might scold my brother for surfing the internet too long because he doesn't have much self-control, and they need to restrain him. He almost never studies on his own, and it is always either drawing, playing computer games, or reading. On the other hand, they never tell me off for using the computer too long. I do my work when I want and need to because that brings me the best results, and my parents understand that. They know that I need leisure time. of my own, and I will only play until needed. My parents' ability to relate well with my brother and I allows them to teach, not just the subject they teach, but also their excellent knowledge of life. So it's a much better supporting paragraph, this. We have a reason up here, talking about his parents being teachers. It looks like he's slightly digressed from the question, but he hasn't. And here he's given a long example as to why he believes that, by talking about his brother and the parents and how they approach their each son individually or differently. Let's have a look at the final two paragraphs. As you can see, again, a lot shorter, this third supporting paragraph. Let's quickly go through it. Knowledge of the subject being taught is something taken for granted, but at the same time secondary. It's a nice expression. One must go through and pass a series of courses and tests in order to become a teacher. Any teacher is able to have excellent knowledge of their subject, but not all teachers can have the ability to relate well with students. Again, compared to the second paragraph, it's a much weaker paragraph. I think, again, we're missing an example here. Let's go on to the final paragraph, the conclusion. A teacher's primary goal is to teach students the best they can about how to show respect for one another. So teachers use different approaches when teaching, and knowledge of the subject being taught is secondary. For these reasons, I claim with confidence that excellent knowledge of the subject being taught is secondary to the teacher's ability to relate well with their students. That's a nice conclusion. So if we have a quick look at the language again being used here, we don't have any overly complicated grammatical structures. Actually, I'm sure everybody who may be watching at the moment, there's 8 people watching, hi 8 people, who may be watching at the moment, I think we can all be confident in the fact that we're able to write an essay like this. I think there's no real complicated advanced grammatical points. We have some nice adverbial structures here. Maybe we need some practice with that. And we also have example of what we call complex language. This is complex language because it doesn't have much self-control. You know, as soon as we use a connector and join two clauses together, clause cumlecik. Once we join two clauses together, we now have what we call complex language. Complex does not mean complicated. My mouth's very dry. And it's the same with these two paragraphs here. So what did the ETS think about this? Well, I'm not going to read their explanation. We'll pull it up here. But as you can see down here, I think all of you will be surprised that this essay actually got maximum points. It got 5 points. Now, when ETS mark your essay, they'll give you a score between 1 and 5. And then this will be translated into an overall score for the writing section. As we know, in the writing section, we have 2 tasks. We have integrated writing, which is the first of the 2. And then we have independent writing, which is the last of the 2. And the total points for this section is 30 points. So each writing task is worth 15 points. 5 into 15 is 3. So if you get 1 point at TOEFL, then you've basically got 3 points out of 15. If you get 2 points, you get 6 points out of 15. 3 points, which is 9 points out of 15. Then we have 4, which is 12 out of 15. And then we have, of course, 5 points, which is the maximum. 15 out of 15. And even though you may not have been impressed with the language here, you can have a read of that. I'm not going to read it. You know, he is happy with the language and the level of language being used, despite the mistakes being made. And this is important. You know, even despite the paragraphs being unbalanced, even despite the introduction being slightly weak. You know, the main point here is that the person who has written this essay, he or she, they have actually shown the person marking the essay the language that they can use. And that's what we need to do. We actually have 30 minutes. Of course, we should follow the conventions of essay writing. We need it to be organized. We want it to be balanced. We will be memorizing some structures because we need to guarantee an absolute point. We need to guarantee that we get the most points possible. So let's go on to the 4 steps of writing. We're only going to do 3 of these steps today, because we're only going to basically be focusing on writing the introduction and the supporting paragraphs. What time is it? 20 minutes. I've got a feeling that I'm going to finish this far too quickly today, but let's see how we go. If we do, then we'll just move on to adjective clauses to finish the lesson off. Adjective clauses, they're useful for the writing section anyway. But we'll just have a look at some practice. So, step number 1, of course, is read the question. I'm not going to waste your time and ask you. But TOEFL is about answering questions. And as I've been covering in the reading lessons for the last couple of weeks, we always start with the question. Now, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be asked a do you agree or disagree question, like this one. It's a classic question. It's one of the ETS favorites. There is a possibility that you'll be asked a different question. The question may be, I don't know, some people prefer going on holiday by themselves. Other people tend to go with groups of people. Which approach to holiday making do you prefer and why? And here, we don't have a do you agree or disagree question, but we've got a comparative essay. They both follow a very, very similar structure. Buy one, get one free, a very, very similar structure. If you're going to practice at home, if you have a TOEFL exam coming up, then I do recommend that you practice as much as you can on this question. You can find a list of questions on the internet. Parents are the best teachers. That's our statement. And then we have specific reasons and examples to support your response. As I said, a classic TOEFL question. Now, we can actually break this question down into 3 parts. We have the first part here, the second part here, and we have the final part here, specific reasons and examples. So let's have a look at the first part. So what can we learn from this part? What does this part actually tell us? It tells us how we need to organize our essay, the basic structure and organization of each paragraph in relation with each other. So let's bring our paragraphs up, and up here, press the wrong button. Up at the top, of course, we have our introduction, and we'll be looking at how we can write our introduction a little bit later on today. Then, of course, and then we have, of course, our supporting paragraphs, and a good essay should have around 3 supporting paragraphs. If you really want to guarantee yourself a score, 3 supporting paragraphs always looks better than 2. The problem with 2 supporting paragraphs, well, the first is word count. We want to be writing around 300 words. Hopefully, with practice, you'll be writing around 400 words. It's going to get a little bit more difficult writing 400 words with 2 supporting paragraphs and making sure that they're balanced. And I often find that one supporting paragraph is often longer than the other. So we're going to have 3 supporting paragraphs, and of course, done it again, slippery fingers. And then we have our conclusion. We're not going to talk about the conclusion today. I'll leave that for the next time, as it were. We'll come back to that at a later date, hopefully. So, what we could do here in our supporting paragraphs, of course, agree or disagree. Sometimes people look at a question and go, it's a really complicated question. I don't know if I agree or I don't know if I disagree. Maybe I can agree and disagree. And so in their first supporting paragraph, they talk about why they agree. And then in the second supporting paragraph here, they talk about maybe why they disagree. And then in the third supporting paragraph, they either agree or disagree, or worse, they agree and disagree in the final supporting paragraph. And another way people approach this is they take a general idea like, I don't know, maybe business, maybe education, maybe technology. And they'll talk about why people agree with this main idea. And in the same paragraph, they'll discuss why some people may disagree. The problem with that is we have to do the same in every other paragraph. So if you're going to have a main idea here and talk about why people agree and disagree, then you have to do the same in the second supporting paragraph, and you have to do the same in the third supporting paragraph too. It's not impossible. You can write this essay and do very well, but in my experience, it's a very difficult essay to write. The balance, the strength of each supporting paragraph, it is a very delicate essay, and it requires a lot of practice and a lot of skill. Not necessary. The question is already asking us anyway, do you agree or disagree? The question wants us to choose one. It wants us to either agree in all three supporting paragraphs, give the first reason why we agree, the second reason why we agree, and the third reason why we agree, or we have to think of 3 reasons why we disagree. Now, students often have a problem with this approach. One of the first questions I get asked in classroom is, but what if I don't totally agree or totally disagree? Well, it's not really important. I don't... personally, when I approach a TOEFL essay, if I agree or disagree really isn't important to me. I just choose the one which is going to be easiest. Maybe I agree with the question, but I can only think of maybe one idea as to why I agree. But if I think about the opposite side of the coin, why people disagree, if I can think of more reasons for disagree, even if I agree with the question, I will write an essay about why I disagree. A lot of students, when you're writing essays, especially of this particular level, we try to put a lot of our ego into the essay. This is not an ego-based essay. ETS, they're not interested in how much you know about the subject. They're not really interested in if you know about the subject in an academic way. It's not important. They are only interested in your language ability. TOEFL, at the end of the day, is a language test. It's a level test. It tests the levels of people's English language ability. It's all about the language. The academic part, that's nonsense. And we saw that at the beginning of today's lesson. We had 2 very sort of academic type paragraphs which didn't do very well. And then in the last example that we looked at, we saw that he used ordinary language, he used very personal examples, and he did very well. And that's exactly what we're going to do as well. We need to be able to write an essay in which we can show as much language as possible. The more complicated that essay becomes, the more we're going to struggle with that essay. We're not going to have the same opportunity to show our language ability skills. Anyway, let's get rid of that. And we'll go to the second part of the question. Here, parents are the best teachers. Now, this idea needs to be present in every single paragraph. It needs to be clearly present in each paragraph of your essay, in your introduction, your supporting paragraphs, and even your conclusion. In fact, it should be so clear. If we just take one supporting paragraph, and if we divide that supporting paragraph into its individual sentences, and I gave an individual sentence to separate people, different people, they may not be able to tell me the question in its entirety, but they should be able to tell me it's something to do with parents, it's something to do with teachers, or ultimately it's about a child's education, because this question is about the education of a child. So make sure when you've written your essay, if you need to check your essay, which is one of, it's the last step really, check your essay. We're not going to look at that today. Question each sentence that you've written. Make sure that each sentence is relevant and related to that question. If it's not relevant, well, we've seen what happens when essays are not relevant. If the information you write is not connected to that question, then you're not going to do very well. In fact, they may not even look at that sentence. It may not even come into it. So, okay, I'm still okay. Oh, my back's killing me. Hi everyone. Hi Dawan. How are you? Hi Miriam. How are you? I'm fine today, thank you very much. And how are you? And Duan, welcome to the classroom. I hope you're doing well too. If you have any questions, any questions about independent writing as we're going along, put the questions up on the chat and I'll make sure to check the chat once in a while. As I said today, I wasn't really expecting anybody to attend, so it's just going to be a lot of me talking, but I'm happy to answer any questions regarding TOEFL on the chat. So if you have any questions, go ahead. So back here we have the last part of the question. Use specific reasons and examples to support your response. Now we have we have 5 paragraphs. I'm going to teach you the first 4 paragraphs today. But we have the introduction. If we start up here, we have the introduction. We have supporting paragraph 1, 2, and 3. And then we have the conclusion. Your examples and your reasons belong here. They belong in your supporting paragraph. And as you're writing your essay, always remember that 1 supporting paragraph is equal to 1 reason. And that reason should really only be around a sentence long. I often find if students have 2 sentences or 3 sentences for their reason, it's because they haven't explained themselves clearly to begin with. Your reason should be very, very clear and very, very precise. It should only really require 1 sentence. If you have more than 1 sentence for a reason, then ask yourself if you could maybe change those ideas into a more simplified single sentence. And of course, every reason has to have an example. Absolutely vital. Really, really important. The first thing students forget when they're writing an essay is often the example. They want reasons and examples. So our first supporting paragraph is going to have 1 reason and 1 example. Our second supporting paragraph is going to be 1 reason and 1 example. And our third supporting paragraph is going to be 1 reason and 1 example. So that's step number 1, read the question. So what do you think step number 2 is? Any ideas? I'm asking you a question now. What do you think the next thing is? Step number 1 was read the question. Step number 2, I'll have some coffee whilst I'm waiting. Don't be shy. You're not going to have much opportunity to answer any questions today. This is it, pretty much. Okay, well, I'm not going to wait too long. We're going to plan our essay. Before we start writing on the computer, we're going to plan our essay. I cannot stress enough the importance of a plan. Before an exam, if you're preparing for TOEFL, then you should, the ETS book, they have a list of essay questions. You should have most of those essays planned before you take the exam. There's a lot of advantages to planning essays before the exam. It helps us with language. It helps us learn a new language, vocabulary items. We can become familiar with ideas. So the idea that we use with one plan, we can also use with another plan. And, all of the subjects are basically the same. Essay questions are generally about education. They're often about family life. They can be about social life. They can be about hobbies and interests. They can be about our local area and the local amenities that people use. They're limited in terms of what they're going to ask you. And the more that you plan these essays, the better you're prepared, the better you're going to be prepared for the exam. To begin with, you should be planning for at least 5 minutes before you start writing. But with practice, you should be able to get a good plan down in about 3 minutes. It takes a lot of practice, though. So how do we plan? Well, I've put the question back up here. We're going to start planning this question. Why is learning English important in your country? It's not a TOEFL question. I think I got this from Deborah Phillips Longman back in the day when they first came out with IBT. It's not the type of question you're going to be asked on the exam. As you know, as I've stated before, it's generally going to be agree or disagree. So we're going to start planning by creating a brainstorm, and let's bring a clouding. There we go. There's our brainstorm. And we're going to put down as many ideas as we can as possible. Not just 1, 2, or 3 ideas. We're going to write 3 supporting paragraphs here, So we're not going to stop with just 3. We're going to put our entire mind onto that piece of paper. And then we're going to choose which ideas are going to be the easiest. Sometimes, when you're planning an essay, you try to use really complicated reasons. Not necessary. The simplest reason is going to be the best reason. The simple reasons we can write lots about. The more complicated an idea or a reason is, the more complicated language we need to use, the more chances we're going to make mistakes, the less we're going to be understood, the lower the points we're going to get. So, everybody at home, actually, I'm going to put some ideas up on the board, but if you have any ideas, any good reasons why learning English is important, please put it on the chat, and maybe we can discuss those ideas too. So I planned this earlier today, and of course to make new friends. I remember when Facebook was first popular, people just didn't make friends with their immediate social group or family. They would like and follow people from other countries, people that they didn't know. So to make friends, maybe on social media. Some students have told me that they use it to follow the news, to see what's happening in the world. The younger students and my housemate, maybe, it's important for computer games. A lot of the popular computer games these days that students play, I don't know. I don't play computer games. Sonic the Hedgehog, maybe? Do they still have Sonic? I don't know. They learn a lot of their English and the vocabulary by playing these games and talking to other people who are playing these games at the same time. I'm sorry, I don't know much about computer games. This is as technical as I get, basically. And then we have this really big idea, business. If you look at these ones, they're very specific to make new friends, to follow the news, to play computer games. But business here, it's a big idea. If you come up with these really general big ideas, break them down into smaller ideas. Business, we can write a book about business. So, why is English important in terms of business? Well, very good, Gustafa. It's an international language. And anywhere you go, someone at least will know English. Not always true. If you go to Paris, the French, they hate speaking English. Even if they know English, they'll refuse to speak English with you. It's not true all over the world. But yeah, it's an international language. We'll come back to that very shortly. So back to business. Break that idea down, maybe to get a promotion. A lot of my students, they work for İş Bankası, Akbank, and the stuff. And, they want to get a good TOEFL score so they can get a promotion at work. And of course, if you get a promotion, you're probably going to get a pay rise too. A better position usually means better money. Not always, but generally. Maybe even to get a good job to begin with. There are international companies like Carrefour and other international languages who value a knowledge of a foreign language. Or even maybe to work abroad. I had a friend a couple of years ago. He wanted to improve his English because his plan was to actually go and work abroad. To read books and magazines, maybe. Do people still read books and magazines? I'm not sure. I do. Tourism, a lot of places in Turkey. When you're creating reasons, think about yourself. These questions, they're not academic. Look at the world around you. Look at your friends. Almost certainly you're going to find a reason or a number of reasons as to why here tourism, Turkey, Fethiye, Kaş, Marmaris, all of these areas are high in tourism, higher in tourists. And of course, English is quite an important language down there. Well, I think maybe Russian is now. Russian's the most important one, but still. Yeah. In English, you can't find a good job. It's very essential there. Really? That's interesting, Gustafa. I didn't know that. So you're from Azerbaijan? Are you in Azerbaijan now? Maybe internet and technology. A lot of students feel that they need to have a knowledge of English so they can better understand the internet or access parts of the internet that they can't access back home in their own country, and maybe technology. I don't know. I'm just putting ideas down. Doesn't have to be a good idea. Here we have Gulsafa, her suggestion from earlier. It's an international language. We'll come back to that shortly. And again, we have education, this very large idea, very similar to business. Maybe we can break that down too. Maybe we can break that down into some separate ideas. Let's see how we do. So for education, a lot of my students, they want to go to Bosphorus University or the Middle Eastern University or something or another. And they need to have a knowledge of English for either to just study at that particular university, regardless of the language that they're going to study in, or they need it because it's a required part of their training, their education. Of course, a lot of students want to study abroad. They're not happy with the education that they have in their own country, so they wish to better themselves or, artistlik yapmak, to get an education from a foreign university. Maybe to do a master's degree or a PhD. I know lots of students, some PhDs, they only require 50 points from TOEFL. Imagine that. And, of course, if you're going to do a master's or do a PhD, students have to research. And a lot of the academic papers and academic articles out there, they're in the English language, or you have to go through an English-based website. So that's my plan. I'm happy with this. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 different reasons. And from those 15 different reasons, I'm only going to choose 3. You may think that I've planned too much, but I don't think you can ever plan too much. Any ideas that you have here will help you with another question later on. The hardest thing I find when writing an essay is creating those ideas. Creating ideas becomes much easier if you practice it. Like everything, it requires practice. So what we need to do now is we need to organize. We're going to choose the ones that we think are going to help us best. Well, I'm a TOEFL teacher, so I'm going to stick with education and business. I'm going to choose mine from here. Business because I've got a lot of business students that I can talk about, and education because basically I'm a teacher and I'm comfortable with the language for both of these ideas. Tourism, okay, good reason. I don't go on holiday. I don't know much about tourism. I couldn't really think of an example. So I'm not going to choose tourism. Oh, internet and technology. If you've been following my classes, in terms of technology, I'm not very good. No technical problems today so far. You live in Turkey. Okay, me too. Anyway. Oh, yeah. Sorry, so internet and technology, I'm not a very technical sort of guy. Not interested. Not going to write it. To read books and magazines, maybe. Play computer games, I don't know. No. Okay, it's a good idea, but I don't think I could write 100 words. I've got no personal experience with this type of question, with this particular area. My vocabulary is not enough, my knowledge isn't enough. If I wrote a paragraph, it'd be a very short paragraph. So I'm not going to choose play computer games. I'm not going to choose follow the news. In fact, for my first supporting paragraph, I've already decided students need to go to university. I'm going to use this idea. Now here, you may notice, I haven't just directly took this idea down. I've started to use a subject-verb order. I'm starting to think about a basic idea. I may change this idea later, but I'm not just using to go to university. I've put it in a sentence form, subject, verb, object, and the rest of it. So students need it to go to university. When I'm writing my supporting paragraphs, I can take that idea and I can just plop it down. It's ready. Hazır. My examples now, with your examples, really not important. If you don't have a friend, make one up. You know, they're not going to check your examples. They're not going to go onto the internet, onto your Instagram account or Facebook and go, you know, does this person really have a friend called Fatih? Here with your examples, you just, I don't know, you're writing a story, you know. It's basic. As long as your example's related to your reason, you're going to be fine. Lots of students stop and go, well, what are you doing? Well, I'm thinking of an example. Don't think of an example. Just make something up and get that idea down. You may want to change it later, but, you know, who cares? Paragraph 2. Now, I'm going to choose another area here. I'm going to choose another area in addition to here. Students need it to study abroad. And I'm going to show you a way we can connect those ideas later amongst paragraphs. And then, very quickly, my next door neighbor's son in the UK. Do I have a next door neighbor? No. Does she have a son in the UK? No. Is it important? No. As I said, just get those ideas down. And here, I'm going to choose one from business to get a pay rise or a promotion. Actually, I've put both of those ideas there. I've only made one of them red. Many people need it to get a promotion or a pay rise. They're related with each other. And for that, I'm going to use my cousin who works at Akbank. Or does he? Or does she? Do I have a cousin? Probably not. Not important. So we're going to go for a break now. Thank you for your patience. We're going to go for your break. I'll see you back here at 3 o'clock and we'll continue with the next step, which is going to be writing. We're going to be looking at how we can actually structure our essay and write our essay, beginning with introductions. So let's go for a break. I think that was Control 8.
Olduğun yerden hemen kalkman gerek. Adım at ki gerçekleşsin her dilek. Bekliyor seni parlak bir gelecek. Sen ona gittikçe o sana gelecek. Justenglish'le şimdi sen de dile gel. Justenglish'le şimdi sen de dile. Justenglish'le şimdi sen de dile gel. Justenglish'le şimdi sen de dile gel.
A world with a joy and smile, a world where everyone only by satisfaction and urge to survive in the outside world, Justenglish style. Learn, play, sing and dance, do what you don't see anywhere else. Learn, play, sing and dance, do but do Justenglish style.
Hayat devam ettikçe bitmez bu yarış. Sen de bir dil öğren, macerayla tanış. Hayat devam ettikçe bitmez bu yarış. Sen de bir dil öğren, bu dünyaya karış. Justenglish'le şimdi sen de dile gel. Justenglish'le şimdi sen de dile gel. Justenglish'le şimdi sen de dile gel. Justenglish'le şimdi sen de dile gel.
Knife.
Knife. Enthusiastic.
Enthusiastic.
Pronunciation.
Enthusiastic.
And enthusiasm. Rejustik.
Reci bilmiyorum.
Recipe.
Recipe. Recipe.
Bir daha.
Recipe.
Clark.
Clark.
Pronunciation.
Şimdi sen de dile gel. Olduğun yerden hemen kalkman gerek. Adım at ki gerçekleşsin her dilek. Bekliyor seni parlak bir gelecek. Sen ona gittikçe o sana gelecek. Justinglishle şimdi sen de dile gel. Justinglishle şimdi sen de dile gel. Justinglishle şimdi sen de dile gel. Justinglishle şimdi sen de dile gel.
A world full of joy and smile, a world where everyone only by satisfaction and learn to survive in the outside world. Justinglish style. Learn, play, sing and dance. Do what you don't see anywhere else. Learn, play, sing and dance. Do what do Justinglish style.
Hayat devam ettikçe bitmez bu yarış. Sen de bir dil öğren, macerayla tanış. Hayat devam ettikçe bitmez bu yarış. Sen de bir dil öğren, bu dünyaya karış. Justinglish'le şimdi sen de dile gel. Justinglish'le şimdi sen de dile gel. Justinglish'le şimdi sen de dile gel. Justinglish'le şimdi sen de dile gel.
Knife.
Knife. Enthusiastic.
Enthusiastic.
Pronunciation.
Enthusiastic.
And enthusiasm. Enthusiastic.
Reci bilmiyorum.
Recipe.
Recipe. Recipe.
Bir daha.
Recipe.
Clark.
Clark.
Pronunciation.
And I think we're back. Just getting used to this, and then we stop doing it. Okay, so we'll have a quick camera check as soon as I come up on screen, if I come up on screen. And there I am. Oh, it's black again. How can we solve this? There we go. Solved itself. Okay, I seem to be fine. So before the break time, we looked at planning our essay, and we saw how important it was to plan our essay. Not just help us to create ideas, but also to help us create ideas which we can use in other questions later. The more ideas and the more planning you do, the more ideas you will create. And then in the exam, no matter what question you're asked, you'll be able to come up with a plethora, a large number, a variety of different ideas in a relatively short period of time. And we organized those ideas. In the first paragraph, I decided to go to university, and my friend Fatih, there was an example. Then we had to study abroad, and we have that idea down here. And I just made up an example. You know, as we saw, don't stress the example so much. Not necessary. It's a story. In Turkish, yazmak, you know, yazmak, you know, bir şey sallamak. Salla gitsin. It's not important. Don't stress it. We'll be looking at some grammatical structures we can use to impress the people who are reading our essays a little bit later. We'll make all of that look good. So that's step 2. And we should spend about maybe 5 minutes on planning to begin with, which leaves us with 25 minutes. So step 1 was read the question. Step 2, of course, was plan your essay. And step 3 is write your essay. And that's where we're going to begin the next lesson. We're going to begin by looking at how we can structure our introductions, and then followed by how we can structure and organize our supporting paragraphs. And I'll give you some basic grammatical advice along the way. So we're going to begin by looking at writing the introduction. I need a swig. My mouth's very, very dry. So your introduction, I wish I'd wrote those slightly larger actually. So your introduction is going to consist of 3 sentences, and we're going to look at how we're going to use each sentence individually, how we're going to write each sentence. So our first sentence is going to be a general statement, a fact. Now, if we use a fact in the first sentence, then our choice of tenses are limited. To talk about facts or information, we simply use the present simple. We could also use the present perfect if we're talking about a change. Present perfect is often used to show how one state has changed from how one thing has changed from one state to another over time. Not only that, they're nice general tenses. You know, each supporting paragraph or each introduction, grammatically, in terms of structure, they're going to come down in this, like, I don't know, funnel shape, huni in Turkish. You know, and it's going to have an effect on the tenses that we use as well. At the top of our paragraphs, we're going to use more general tenses like present simple, present perfect simple, or maybe even present perfect continuous. And then as we move down the paragraph, our use of tenses are going to become more specific. We'll look at that a little bit later. Is my head still okay? It's still okay. So let's put that question back up. Why is learning English important in your country? We've just spent a considerable amount of time planning this essay. So let's look at the introduction. And there's the first sentence. The English language is one of the most commonly spoken languages in the world. It's a general idea. It's not talking about the importance of English. We're just talking about the general idea of learning English. As I said, we need to be general in our ideas. If we start talking about learning English, the importance of learning English in Turkey, for example, then we're becoming very, very specific too quickly. We need to be nice and general to begin with. Or we could use the present perfect here over the last 20 years or so. You know, a quick tip about time frames. You know, some students like this, you know, since the beginning of humanity, since the beginning of time, since the creation of the earth, since, I don't know, Adam walked the earth. These very, very long time frames. Try not to use those time frames. Really, it's not necessary. You know, it doesn't have to be specific either. 20, aklıma geldi, yazdım. You know, is it really 20 years? Maybe in reality it's 30, maybe 40 years. Who cares? It's not important. It's just a nice time frame, 20 years. But it's this time frame is only a time frame we can use with the present perfect, or maybe present perfect continuous. We can't use this time frame with the present simple. So over the last years or so, plus present perfect or present perfect continuous. And here we've just talked about how it's become more common over the last 20 years. It's now more common than it was 20 years ago. And that's basically this comparative sentence here. I'm going to stick with, whoops, that's not working. I'm going to stick with the present simple because that's at the top, you know, and it's just easier to do. Not going to stress it too much. In our second sentence, we're going to discuss the opposite opinion. So, for example, if you agree, you're going to talk about in the second sentence why people disagree. Or if you disagree with the question, then in that second sentence, you're going to talk about why people agree. You're going to talk about the opposite of your opinion. And here, I'm just going to put this in. Many people around the world learn English for many different reasons, ranging from finding friends to working in tourism. In terrorism. In terrorism. No. Well, maybe. No. A quick tip here. keep your nouns, very general. As I said, we're at the top of the essay. Our ideas and our grammatical structures need to be very general. Many people around the world learn. Here again, I'm using the present simple. As I said, we're at the top of the funnel. Our tenses are going to be simple tenses, or maybe perfect simple, or our push may be perfect continuous. In the next sentence, we're now going to contrast this sentence that we've just read. We're going to contrast this with our own belief. And we're going to do that by doing this. Learning English in Turkey, however, is important for a number of different reasons. And here, however, you can only use however if this sentence is correct. Where are we? This sentence here, many people around the world learn English for many different reasons. If that is not the opposite to your idea, then this last sentence isn't going to work. It's the first mistake students make when they're writing their introduction. This is the most difficult sentence, the first sentence, coming up with an idea. But also be very careful about the relationship between these two sentences. Shall we have a look at another example together? I don't know. Okay, we'll look at another question. Parents are the best teachers. Again, this is a do you agree or disagree question. We're going to use a very, very similar structure. We're going to change it slightly, but we're going to use a very similar structure. Again, do you agree or disagree? Parents are the best teachers. Use specific reasons and examples to support your response. The same type of question you'll see on the exam. And this time I've decided to go with the present perfect. Over the last 30 years or so, children have been attending school at a much earlier age. Now, if we look at that question, parents are the best teachers, as I said, that first sentence, it needs to be really general. The direct subject here is parents, and we also have teachers over here. We've got two people, but ultimately, the real subject of this question, the general idea of this question is a child's education. Who are they better educated by? Are they better educated by parents or are they better educated by teachers? That's the essence of the general idea. So in my first sentence, I've talked about children, their education, and how it's changed. And I'm an old man. I've seen education change quite a lot over the years. Almost 20 years ago when I first came to Turkey, it was, normal for 7-year-olds to start school at the age of 7. But, over the last 19 years or so, I've seen children going to school at a much younger age, 4, maybe 3, starting their education and continuing it until they finish. 30 years, I don't know. Salı işte. Salı gitsin. It looks good. It's not a long time period. It's a reasonable, logical time period. Maybe it's 35 years. Maybe it's 33 years. I don't know. I'm not an expert. They don't want you to be an expert. In the second sentence, again, I've started with many people believe. This is slightly different from the structure we saw earlier with the English language being important. Now, with do you agree or disagree questions, we're going to be using the verb believe, and we're going to be using it in the present simple. Again, my nouns are very general. I'm not talking about a specific person. I'm talking about people in general. Again, we're at the top of the funnel, we're at the top of the huni. Our tenses are going to be general too. And again, I've continued with believe, of course, and this is a belief, so it's going to be present simple too. Now, for this reason, it's not really part of the structure. Occasionally, sometimes that first sentence and that second sentence will be closely related. It's not always possible. You're not always going to have a conjunction at the beginning of that sentence. My advice is start the second sentence here and then reevaluate the relationship between the two and use a connector if necessary. Here it was just coincidental for this reason. Because children go to school at a much earlier age, many people believe that teachers are the best educators for our children. Again, I'm talking about the opposite idea. This is not my belief. This is what other people believe. This needs to be correct. So this sentence here will be correct too. And if you get this second sentence spot on each time, then that last sentence basically becomes a structure that you memorize. You don't need to change it. You will always disagree. Now be careful. I'm not disagreeing with the question. I'm not disagreeing with the question. Actually, I agree with the question. Here, what I'm actually disagreeing with is the idea what other people think. This is the idea that I'm contrasting. Not the question, I'm contrasting this. And if you do that every time, you will always use the verb disagree here. Regardless as to whether you agree or disagree, it's always going to be disagree because you're disagreeing with the previous sentence. Again, I'm using present simple. This looks like it could be past simple, but don't forget a lot of modal verbs like could and would we also use in the present too. This is a child could have, it's a possibility, a present possibility. And in fact, the best teachers, and we finished off with a number of reasons. This would be called a thesis statement. You know, a thesis statement basically tells the reader what you believe and how your essay is going to be organized, what they should expect from your supporting paragraphs. Let's have a look at another example. Let's get rid of that. Zoos have no useful purpose. Yeah, we'll choose this one. Again, this question, it's a do you agree or disagree question. So the whole question is, do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Zoos have no useful purpose. Use specific reasons and examples to support your response. Again, a classic TOEFL essay. Hey Hussein, how are you? Welcome to the class. Hi. I'm not looking at the chats as often as I usually do. There's only 7 watching anyhow. If you are watching though, it's always nice to say hi. So zoos have no useful purpose. Now, that first sentence here, again, these days, this time I've decided to discuss a fact about this information. They are very popular places for families. I've extended it by using the connector so to give a reason. They can see and learn about wild animals that they wouldn't be able to see. Again, wouldn't hear. Looks like it's past, but it's not, it's present. So it's technically present simple here, I suppose. Here we're using it for possibility, imaginary possibility in the present. Just a nice general fact about that information. Present perfect, zoos have no useful purpose, a change, that would be very difficult. You know, sometimes that present perfect option is not always going to be possible. Fine to you. Well, you're welcome, Hussein. You're welcome. Okay, so there's my second sentence. We're going to discuss the opposite opinion. Again, many people. I'm using the same structures, you know, and you should be using the same structures too. So when you're in the exam, you know already what type of grammatical structures you need to use. You'll be ready, you'll be prepared. You won't be wasting time thinking, how am I going to say this? What do I need to say next? I don't have enough information. What am I going to do? All of those classic problems that we have in the exam. So again, I've used a general noun here, and once more, I've used the present simple. People believe that zoos have no useful function outside of entertaining people, and I've discussed the opposite idea. I've conceded slightly, and now we're going to look at the last sentence, and we're going to contrast this sentence with our own belief, and we'll do that here. I, however, tend to disagree with this point of view, as I believe zoos do in fact have a number of useful purposes for a number of reasons. I'm going to take this back a couple of slides. Have a look at that last sentence again. I, however, tend to disagree with this point of view, as I believe parents are in fact the best teachers a child could have for a number of reasons. Have a look at that structure. Now we're going to jump forward again, and a little bit more. Have a look at that last sentence again. We have a different essay question, but we have pretty much the same structure. You know, the advantage of using the same structure, as I said before, you don't have to think. When you're in the exam, you won't have to think about what you need to write and how you need to write it. You just need to make sure that the structure is correct. I, however, tend to disagree this point of view. Then we have a restatement. I believe zoos have a number of useful purposes. I've changed it slightly for a number of reasons. Exactly the same structure. Okay, so that's our introduction in a nutshell, as it were. So let's go on to writing the supporting paragraphs. Now, as I said before, one supporting paragraph is equal to one reason, and just as importantly, one example. Our reason should be one sentence long. As I said before, if you're explaining your reasons in 2 sentences or 3 sentences, then it's probably, going to be confusing or difficult for the person to understand. Generally speaking, if a reason is clear and precise, you only ever need to have 1 sentence. Something for you to consider when you're writing and checking your own writing essays from time to time. Back's killing me. Then we should always have an example. Again, as I said before, this is one of the areas students forget the most. I can't tell you, if you gave me $1 for every time a student forgot an example, I would be a millionaire. Seriously. I can't begin to tell you how many times I've read essays without examples. Write an example, otherwise you're going to have a very short paragraph. You're going to have 3 supporting paragraphs, a total of 3 sentences. On average, 16 words per sentence. I don't know, you do the math. 1 reason, 1 example. Short. We're going to go back to the original question. Why is learning English important in your country? And I think we'll have enough time at the end of this. I think we may have enough time to write an essay or maybe look at some adjective clauses. So that was the plan that we did together in the first half. My first supporting paragraph, we have my reason here. Students need it to go to university. I'm not happy with that sentence. I may change that sentence shortly, but it's given me a basic idea. I could just drop it into the structure that I'm about to show you. And there was my example, my friend Fatih and Bosphorus University. Not too much information. I haven't written any sentences, just some key words to help me remember the story, so I don't have to waste time whilst I'm writing. So before we begin, we're going to look at structure. I'm going to do the same thing for each supporting paragraph. We're going to be doing pretty much the same thing continuously. And I'm going to, as we construct each supporting paragraph, I think repetition is important. It will help you understand some of the important concepts. Sometimes 1 paragraph isn't enough. 1 time is not enough. So we need to talk about our reason. That's going to be the beginning of our supporting paragraph. And we know that we only need 1 sentence. We don't need any more than 1 sentence. Now, we could say firstly, again, have a look here. We've got that nice general noun, many students. In our supporting paragraph, we had many people. Now, in our first line, we have many students. We're using the present simple again, because this is generally true. They have a knowledge of English. I've decided to change this, actually, to have a knowledge of English in order to be accepted. I've gone with the passive structure because it was simple. It's just infinitive passive. It was just easier and nicer to use that by some universities. Just gave me a little bit more length in that sentence. I could have just said, firstly, students need to go to university. That's possible. That's also correct. But, firstly, we have to write 300 words, minimum 300. No, it's not minimum. Don't misunderstand me. It's not a minimum of 300 words, but it's an average, and we don't want to be below average. And what they mean by a 300 words average, every person who's taken the exam ever, on average, all of those people have written about 300 words. Of course, it's possible to write 250 words and still do very well. In the same way, it's also possible to write 400 words and do very well. But don't forget, the more you write, the more mistakes you're likely to make. 400 words isn't going to guarantee you a good score. 400 words will guarantee you a good score if they are a good 400 words. Grammatically and lexically good. So don't be under the opinion that the more you write, the more points you're going to get. There's no such thing. You could write less words than 300. You could write an essay of 250. You're not going to lose points because you have written less. You just have to work harder in 250 words, harder to show them the language that you have. The aim of the writing section is to show them as much of the language as you can, but correctly, so go slow. I think with practice, if you, before the exam, you need, say one essay is 30 minutes. Before the exam, you need to have planned and written around maybe 15 to maybe 30 essays, depending on your skill level. It usually takes 15 to 30 essays for these structures to really settle down and for students to stop making the classic mistakes. It does require practice. You can't just learn about writing and take the exam tomorrow. Everything requires practice. So one word, I don't know, can we say the same thing but in a slightly different way? Well, I could use this structure. The first reason is because many students need to have a knowledge of English. The sentence hasn't changed. The first reason is because I've made it a complex sentence. Now, we've gone from a simple sentence, this one here. This is a simple sentence. We have one subject, one verb. Okay, we've got the infinitive, but there's no conjunctions here. And now we're using a conjunction. So now we have two subjects, and the first reason is one subject. Many students is the second subject. And then we've got the verb is, and then we have a second verb, need, and then we have this conjunction. We now have complex language. It's looking better. Not only is it longer, grammatically it's looking better, and it's simple to use. Just get your subject here. You could say the first reason is because students need it to go to university. Doctor, that's correct too. Don't forget, I just wanted to change my sentence here. We can make that a little bit longer. Here we still have that the first reason, and we have is because here, but between these two, I've put in another noun clause. Why I believe learning English is important. Why I believe restatement of the question, why is learning important in your country? Learning English is important. Put it in the sentence form and restate that question. We've now gone from only having one word plus our sentence to having 5 words plus our sentence. And now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we've gone from extending it by 1 word to 12 words. And you can use that basically we can even use it with this. The first reason why I believe learning English is important is because students need it to go to university. Looks much better. Even if we just kept the simple students need it to go to university, if we didn't make that longer, it would now be much, much longer. It looked good. So I'm going to go with this one here. I could have gone with this one. I could have gone with this one. But I think this one is better. We've got complex language within complex language. So I'm going to put that one there. The first reason why we could extend it even more actually. You could say the first reason as to why I believe learning English. We can put another 2 words in there, but we're not going to. The first reason why I believe learning English in Turkey is important is because many students need to have a knowledge of English in order to be accepted into some universities. My reason is finished. How many sentences? 1. 1 long sentence. It's a nice structure. Practice doing it before you do it in the exam. It does require practice, but it's easily done. We're going to do a similar thing with the second supporting paragraph too. Now, my friend Fatih, Bosphorus University. Now, I've got a number of options. Now, of course, he's an example, so we're going to say, for example, and here we're going to use an adjective clause. Fatih, who is my best friend. Now, traditionally, most students would use this at the beginning of a sentence. However, for example, is an adverbial. And it's one of those adverbials that have three positions. We can use it at the beginning of the sentence, or we can use it after the subject, or we can use it at the end of the sentence. I don't recommend using it at the end of the sentence. It can be a little bit difficult. So I'm going to use it not in the first position, I'm going to use it in the second position here. Whoops, I'm going to use it in the second position. Everybody is going to be using, for example, at the beginning of a sentence. My advice is, once again, use it after the subject. Now, of course, this is an adjective clause. It has to be used with the noun. We can't put, for example, here. We can't say, Fatih, for example, who is my best friend. It makes that noun form and its adjective clause a little bit too distant. So we don't like to separate the noun from its adjective clause. If we use adjective clauses, we use them with the noun. The same with adjectives, actually. You know, a fat man. We don't say fat a man, shishko bir adam in English. For that very reason, we don't like to separate the adjective and the noun from each other. So I'm going to use it in that position. Now, when we look at this adjective clause here, we've got Fatih, and then we have my best friend. Now, this is what we call an appositive adjective clause. Unfortunately, we won't have time for a full lesson on these. Maybe we'll have some practice in a moment. But basically, an appositive adjective clause is when we have two nouns like this. We've got the noun, my best friend, and the noun, Fatih. They're the same thing. Actually, we could say, Fatih is my best friend. Or we could say, my best friend is Fatih. They're directly related with each other. And when we have that relationship in an adjective clause, we can take away this verb, this relative pronoun who, this connector. But we also have to take away the verb to be as well. These are necessary for this to be correct. But if this and this are a positive, then we can take these away from the sentence. It's not necessary. So it looks something like this. Fatih, my best friend, for example. Sorry. We've used upper intermediate, slightly advanced grammar, and we've reduced that adjective clause. Okay, we have to write 300 words. I think a lot of you, but why we're now missing 2 words? If we write who is, we have 2 words more. You know, that's not the point. The point is we have to show them the grammatical structures that we're capable of. And this is a nice, easy one. Okay, we've lost 2 words here, but here we've said, like, we've basically given the message, hey, look at me. I know how to use adjective clauses. Actually, what we can do now we've reduced it, we can change their position. So instead of having Fatih, my best friend, for example, we can now say my best friend Fatih, for example. And that brings Fatih and for example after the subject in a much more logical position. So I'm going to use that one. Actually, if we have another look, Kemal Atatürk, who was the founder of the Turkish Republic, was born in 1881. Again, we have Atatürk, and then we have the founder of the Turkish Republic. They're the same person. And we have the relative pronoun who, and we have a verb to be. Here it's in the past. Kemal Atatürk was the founder of the Turkish Republic. The founder of the Turkish Republic was Kemal Atatürk. We can go in a continuous circle. And when we go in a continuous circle, as I said, we call this apposition in grammatical terms. So we can get rid of this relative pronoun and we can get rid of this verb to be, just like that. We still have a grammatically correct sentence. We've just reduced that adjective clause. So now we have Kemal Atatürk, the founder of the Turkish Republic, was born in 1881. Again, as you can see, the subject's very far away from his verb. So what we can do now, we can take this phrase and we can take this phrase and we can just and swap them over, just like that. The founder of the Turkish Republic, Kemal Atatürk, was born in 1881, a much nicer looking sentence. And we're also using complex language. Not only are we using complex language, but we're using reduced complex language. So I'm going to put that here. My best friend, Fatih, for example. And I'm going to continue with this. Of course, we have the subject, so we need a verb. And my friend wanted to study at Bosphorus University. And again, look, we have a noun, Bosphorus University, and I've used yet another adjective clause. Basically, if you're going to talk about a person or a place, always use an adjective clause to give some information about that person or place. Doesn't matter what that information is, just use it. It's complex language. Adjective clauses, they should be easy for most. Not only is there adjective clause, I've done exactly the same thing. Bosphorus University, which is one of Turkey's most prestigious universities, is the complete one. Bosphorus University and this phrase, they are a positive. We could say Bosphorus is one of Turkey's most prestigious universities, yada. We could say one of Turkey's most prestigious universities is Bosphorus University. We have that relationship. So I've taken that pronoun and that verb away. Not only that, adjective clauses, they really help us get to that 300-word limit. You know, if I just said at Bosphorus University, if we look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words less, you know, for each adjective clause, you know, 6 words. Again, here I'm using past simple, nothing overly complicated. I'm not using past perfect because I don't need to. As I've said in lessons before, we don't choose tenses. We use language to talk about tenses. Tenses are actions in time. You know, I use the past simple because I have to use the past simple. I use the past perfect because I have to use the past perfect. I don't use it şey artistlik için. You know, gerekiyorsa sadece kullanıyorum. I've used however here to show surprising information, not contrasting information. It was surprising. In order to be accepted, he needed to have a TOEFL score of at least 80 points. And basically, I'm telling a story from the beginning to the very end. Again, I'm continuing with past simple, nothing overly complicated. I don't need past perfect, so I'm not using past perfect. And then here, I've given the story a little end, or coming towards the end. Eventually, after months of studying very hard, he finally passed the exam. Again, past simple, and got the score he wanted, past simple. And as a result, we have a connector. He was accepted into Bosphorus University. Whoops. Okay. So we've got the structure at the very top here. That's our first sentence. That's our reason. And then we followed it by our example below. And as you can see, how many sentences is this? That's 1, 2, there you go, 3 sentences. 1 reason, 3 sentences for the example. Just tell that story. Everything here, the only important thing is that everything here has to be related to this idea here, the idea of learning English. Let's look at the next supporting paragraph. So with the next supporting paragraph, we took another idea from education, just like our first supporting paragraph. And our reason was students need it to study abroad. The example, again, doesn't have to be a real example. Make something up. It's not important. As I said, I don't have a next door neighbor, and even if I did, he or she probably wouldn't have a son because I hate children. So here my next door neighbor's son wanted to go to the UK. Again, I haven't created any sentences here because I'm going to be using the same structures a little bit later. So why is learning, So we're going to, I could use the same structure. The second reason why I believe learning English in Turkey is important is because students need it to study abroad. I could, but I'm not. I'm not this time, because if you remember in the first supporting paragraph, it was about education, and in the second supporting paragraph, it's about education too. We have an idea of addition. I could use this, it's not wrong, you know, if you can't think of anything else, but if you have the opportunity, I'm going to go for in addition to. In addition to the paragraph before, I'm going to show that those two supporting paragraphs are directly related with each other. In addition to is a preposition. So when we use the verb needs to be in the gerund form, ing. Don't forget, prepositions can only be followed by an object noun, an object pronoun, or an object gerund. They're the only things we can have after a preposition. And I'm going to continue that. Not only this is the first paragraph, to have knowledge of English to be accepted at university, that was paragraph 1. And here in my second clause, I'm going to talk about this reason here. They also need to know English so they can study abroad. And I've just put my second idea in there as well. So 9 times out of 10, you'll probably be using this structure for your second supporting paragraph, but occasionally, you know, you're going to have 2 paragraphs talking about the same thing. Maybe you'd like to use this structure. In fact, that's the structure I'm going to use. And we'll just put that sentence there. In addition to students needing to have a knowledge of English to be accepted into university, they also need to learn English so they can study abroad. So now we're back onto our example. So once again, I could use for example at the beginning of the sentence, but I'm not. I'm going to use for example in the second position. And the second position, when we have an adjective clause like this, it's after the adjective clause. If we don't have the adjective clause, then of course we use it after the subject Michael. Now, let's take a closer look at this adjective clause. Michael, who is my next door neighbor's son. We have a similar structure here. We have that relative pronoun who. We have the verb to be. And then we have this noun phrase here, and we have a noun here. So let's see if they're related. Michael is my next door neighbor's son. And that sounds good. My next door neighbor's son is Michael. We have this apposition, this relationship between the noun in the relative clause and the noun in the main clause. So we can get rid of who is. Actually, we can take it away totally from that sentence. So we now have Michael, my next door neighbor's son, for example. We can improve this by bringing Michael over here so he, as a part of language, is closer to the adverbial. My next door neighbor's son, Michael, for example, and then we'll have the verb form. So that's what we're going to use. We'll use that one. My next door neighbor's son, Michael, for example. So now I need to continue this sentence. Of course, we have our subject here. So I need to continue with a verb form. And what did he want? He wanted to study in the UK 5 years ago, but he didn't know any English. Again, I'm only using past simple. You know, I don't need to go. I'm doing all the complicated work here. This type of essay would get me 5 points on the exam, almost certainly. I know from experience, actually. And then after talking to his parents, here we've used another reduced clause. Actually, the original sentence should be after he talked to his parents about his plans. But we've reduced that clause by saying after talking to his parents about his plans, they agreed to pay him to go on a course. We've just reduced that sentence by using a present participle, not a gerund, present participle. Then what happened afterwards? He went on the course almost every night for 2 years, and after a lot of hard work and dedication, he eventually managed to learn the language and speak it quite fluently. You know, our stories come to an end. quite basically for that one. Again, I'm not using, there's very complicated grammatical structures here. Grammatically it's strong. Just because I'm using past simple doesn't mean, and just because you can understand it, doesn't mean it's not going to do well. And then we have the last sentence. Sometimes I like to close a paragraph off, like give a happy ending to a story. As a result, all of his hard work is now, after all of his hard work, he's now studying in the UK, fulfilling his dreams. Okay, so let's go on to the next one, next supporting paragraph, and I think we're almost finished. Yeah, we've got 3 minutes. Spot on today. Spot on. It's going to take me about 3 minutes as well. So paragraph 3, we had many people need it to get promotion or pay rise. And then we had the example down here, my cousin Akbank. We got 2 minutes. So we're going back to the reason. We could say finally many people need to get a promotion or pay rise, but we're not going to. We're going to change the structure that we looked at earlier, and we're going to use the same, we're going to use the same idea. So we could extend it by 5 words. The final reason is because it has exactly the same meaning. Sentence is used in exactly the same way, or we can extend that by using a noun clause here and restating that statement. The final reason why I believe learning English is important is because, and then continue with our sentence. That's the one I'm going to go with, and I've put it in already. And then we need to think about our examples. I'm going to show you something slightly different with the example. So of course, am I going to use it at the beginning of the sentence, or am I going to use, for example, in the second position? And I think you all know the answer. We're going to use it here in the second position. We have apposition again, Freddie, who is my cousin. My cousin is Freddie. Freddie is my cousin. We can do that. And we can also do that. And as you know, we can also do that. But now we've done this, what I can also do, I now have the ability to use another adjective clause. Now I have 2 adjective clauses. I have the reduced fronted appositive adjective clause here. I don't know how I remember all of this stuff. And then we have the non-essential adjective clause here on this side. We can only do this if we bring that noun here, my cousin, to the front. Now we've extended it. You can do this all the time, actually. Now we've extended this even further, and we have 2 complex sentences within a single sentence. And that's what I'm going to put down here. And we're going to continue that sentence. Again, Akbank, it's a noun. Use an adjective clause. Give some information about that noun. Make sure you have the comma and the comma after 2. And there we go. His manager offered, again, past simple. I'm using it because I need to, on the condition that I get a good out score. However, to show contrasting, surprising information, again, past simple, nothing really special here. Okay, so that's brought us to the end of independent writing. Spot on today, Joseph. Well done. 3:45, eventually. I haven't finished before, and I've got enough material. Okay, so anyway, thank you very much for those who joined today. Hussein, Gulai, and Gulai, sorry I'm late. I'm sorry I didn't see you there, Gulai. Hello, hope you're still here. Or probably not. I didn't say no. Gulsafa and everybody else, thank you for coming today. I hope you found it useful. And I'll see everybody on Saturday. Last day on Saturday, we'll be looking at TOEFL reading strategies. So if you're taking the TOEFL exam, I'd like to see you then too. Okay? Have a nice day. I'll see you all later.